The president of the university is who is going to be speaking to us, though. And he's a graduate, sum cum laude, whatever that is. I never got close to those types of things when I was going to college. But from Xavier University, in classical languages and philosophy. And I says, what in the world is a person like that doing as a president of a university? You don't think of that as a president. But when you read his bio, it is unbelievable the leadership positions that people that have tapped him for his leadership. So you can understand why this diocese has got him to come down and make a change in recognizing the college's Catholic identity. You know, that can be controversial, and I think many of you here have discussed that among Catholic colleges. So, in a sense, he might be coming in front of a group that might want to ask some pretty important questions later. So get ready for that, Jonathan. So with that, I'm going to... he does live here in the area. He goes to St. Rita's. He's got 9 children. Boy, that's so Catholic of you. Very nice. He's got 2 granddaughters. And he's going to talk about the role of Catholic university in church vocations. With that, I want you to give a warm welcome to Dr. Jonathan Sanford. Dr. Sanford.
Three grandchildren. We just had our first grandson, our second son, and one in the oven. So with our other son, it's really a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you for the invitation. Certainly, I want to thank you more significantly for the remarkable work that you do in fostering vocations throughout the world. It is truly inspiring. And we're blessed at the University of Dallas to have our own Serra chapter. And I was invited and accepted, although I'm a very poor Serran because I don't show up for a lot of things. Our masses and get-togethers are during drop-off time when I've got to be at 3 different schools in the morning for our younger kids. But it's a tremendous blessing. And I'll say a few things about the Catholicity of the University of Dallas. The name can be perhaps misleading, but the university is remarkable in its commitment to Catholicism. What I want to talk about is, and I want to talk about this because I do think I've got, in some respects, a unique perspective on the challenges of the youth of today. I've been involved in Catholic higher education for a long time. I went to a Catholic university. I went to a secular university for my doctoral work, and then I worked at Fordham University in New York. I was there during 9/11. Bishop Burns was talking about those events. And then I taught for many years at Franciscan University of Steubenville in Ohio, and now at the University of Dallas. And I grew up in a Catholic university environment. I grew up in South Bend, Indiana. And it's been remarkable to see the way in which different Catholic universities wrestle with their Catholicism and embody the Catholic intellectual tradition. I also, as you heard, have 9 children, and our eldest was born in 1996, and our youngest in 2019, and a lot of funny stories there with that spread, and my wife did not take well being called a geriatric pregnant woman, but that's the medical term, as you can imagine. And there have been some significant shifts in our culture over that period of time. So it's not just reflecting upon college students who I've taught and led for many years, but also thinking about our own children. We have 7 sons. My wife likes to joke that if we don't get a priest out of this crew, it's not our fault, because we talk regularly about vocations, and we do have a son who's actively discerning now. He's still in high school, and he's got a group of young men at the same school, Cistercian Preparatory School, which is right next to the University of Dallas. They pray together on a daily basis, briefly in the morning, and then they meet for about an hour one time during the week. They work with Cistercians, they work with diocesan priests. I have a friend who's an assistant vocations director for the Congregation of Holy Cross. He's trying to pull them that direction. We'll see. God's got his own plans. So when I think about fostering vocations, I mean, there's so much work that we already do. We invite people to consider a vocation. We encourage their persistence in their vocations. We dedicate so much of our time and our treasure and our talent into the institutions that are nurturing those who are going through their formation. But there's work that I think needs to be done on a broader scale, the cultural scale. And I want to talk about some of the challenges that confront young people today, young men in particular, on that broader scale, and then offer a few remarks about what we might do to reclaim our culture for Christ and to carve out a culture in which discerning a vocation and pursuing a vocation can seem, on the one hand, attractive and also impactful. Because young people today, you probably hear a lot of negative things about, it used to be the millennials, it's the Gen Z generation now. They do have all kinds of problems. They can be socially awkward. They don't know how to make a phone call. They just can text. And that's just at the surface level. But there is a deep hunger in the souls of young people today, despite all of the confusion and beneath it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what we can do to feed that hunger and to direct them to a relationship with our Lord Jesus Christ. I want to begin with a little Pittsburgh anecdote. Bishop Burns left, but I was thinking about this at the beginning because it was, for me, a kind of moment of epiphany. I think it was our seventh child. My wife was going to a birth center in Pittsburgh, which is only about 45 minutes away from Steubenville, Ohio. And she had an excruciating labor, 23 hours at the birth center. And then they said, okay, we're not legally allowed to persist any longer here. We need to take you to a hospital. So we went to UPMC. And it was maybe 6 or 7 hours later that finally our son David was born. And I'd been up, of course, the whole time, and was feeling a little stir crazy. My wife was finally able to sleep. David was in the nursery, and so I decided just to take a walk and get some air. So I'm walking several blocks away from UPMC, and I notice a group gathering on one side of the street, and then I notice St. Paul Cathedral on the other side of the street. And there's a bishop, Zupich. There are some priests and some others. So a whole bunch of white gathering on the steps. I don't know what the event was. Could have been an ordination, could have just been some other event. But they were gathering to have a picture. And on the other side of the street, there were just passersby who were gathering, and they started shouting profanities and jeering. And some of them were screaming, child abusers, just the most vile language being used. As I was getting closer, it kind of, the priest went back inside, and people went the other, went their way. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. The courage that it must take for men to wear the collar or the habit. I see a Dominican amongst us. The courage it must take. Now, this was still in the throes of the pre-sex abuse crisis. But as you know, so many priests are so faithful to their vows, and yet within the public mind, so many of them were in some way part of this horror. And I still see things on occasion. There are these eruptions now and then, and there's no denying that great evil was done, as Bishop Burns was talking about the church on the one hand and the imperfect people who make it up on the other. We should never hide from that evil. But certainly it's been highlighted in ways that are meant to draw down the church and to implicate those who have been faithful throughout their long lives. So that's one impediment, and it's one you're all familiar with when it comes to young men considering the priesthood, particularly young men who aspire to do great things, right? They've already got a major strike against them, which is they will be regarded by some as a social pariah, right? And they know that. Many young men who are in seminary now, many young men who are considering vocations, they come from broken families. The divorce rates are significant. And many parishes are not thriving. You may belong to some parishes where there aren't that many young families. We're blessed in the Diocese of Dallas with some really thriving parishes, particularly with youth programs, but that's the exception. And so there's a loss for many young people in a real clear idea about what it is to have a Catholic culture. And then another significant event, this was 2011, the occasion I was describing in Pittsburgh. 2007 was when the iPhone was first introduced. By 2011, it was really ubiquitous. I use an iPhone. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not going to tell you that you should never utilize technology. But I think that those of my age, those a little bit older and a little bit younger, we experienced a world in which the iPhone was not ubiquitous, where we engaged with each other in face-to-face moments throughout the day. And there are these weird offshoots for those who haven't had those opportunities. It's common on social media to be overly aggressive and to overshare. Young people don't know how to navigate conflict with each other in real time, in face-to-face encounters. Young people have a really hard time sharing about themselves and building friendships. And COVID has certainly not helped, right? The degree of isolation. We had a couple of years of those juniors and seniors in high school throughout the country. Many of them hardly went to an actual school, right? And their education is mediated through a screen. So when I say there's a breakdown in the broader culture, there's a breakdown in many cases, as I was saying before, their families, and there's a breakdown in their smaller clusters of communities where they just don't have friends and they don't always know what it is to develop a friendship. And I'm a student of several key philosophers I really take to heart, Aristotle and Aquinas in particular, both of whom argue that friendship is the most significant element, the best good of human life. And Aquinas, besting Aristotle on this point, defines charity, the theological virtue of charity, as God's love for man, God's love for the human being, right? But the term he uses is, it's a friendship term, okay? God's befriending us, or as Jesus says in St. John's Gospel during the Last Supper discourse, right? I call you friends. And the walk of faith, it's a walk of friendship. So just consider for a moment, if you don't know how to make natural friendships, you don't know how to argue without quarreling, you don't know how to express yourself appropriately, unless it's mediated through a screen, and there it's often inappropriately, you're going to have a hard time really cultivating a deep, lifelong, ultimately, hopefully, eternal friendship with the God who has befriended us. So there are other outcomes from the overuse of this technology, and but it's not the iPhone alone that points to the rising rates of emotional distress amongst young people. Even at the University of Dallas, where we tend to draw students from whole families with a mom and dad at home who've raised them to be reflective and Catholic. The rate of reliance on psychological counseling is surprising, just compared to 10 years ago. And on a broader level, right, there are these deaths by despair. You may have heard of this term. In the Ohio Valley, where I was for many years, it's really epidemic, the number of people who have a kind of slow decline. Bishop Burns was talking about in Alaska, the over-reliance on substances and alcohol. A sense that life is hopeless, that there are not real goals to aspire to, has taken root even amongst this younger generation. Suicide rates are up. And I see even with young people that I've taught, both at Franciscan University and now at the University of Dallas, a fear of failure, a fear that if they make a mistake, if they get a D on their essay, if they say the wrong thing to a young man or woman that they might be interested in asking out on a date, if they mess up in some way, it's going to be catastrophic. And I think that's something that everyone in this room didn't experience in the same way. I mean, I screwed up all the time. So did my siblings. We took our punishment if that was coming, and we got over it. I tried out different things when I was studying. I was almost an English major. That would have been a radical departure from philosophy and classics. But this generation, they feel a lot of anxiety about that, and that makes them risk averse, and it makes them unresilient when it comes to navigating challenges. So I wanted to say these things about this generation just to give some color to the challenges that I think we need to bear in mind. And the theme that I'll conclude with is this theme of friendship. And I know that you're already engaged in seeking to cultivate friendships with young people, encouraging them. But I want to ask you to redouble your efforts to do that, and not think that the fact that you're older than they are, or that you're disconnected, that's not an impediment. These young people, they know that they're missing something. They don't know how to pursue friendships. They don't know how to be friends themselves. So part of what we need to do sometimes is show them what it is to be a friend. And that's a major time investment, but it pays dividends in their lives. Unfortunately, many, when I begin to think about where things should be going better, we have many Catholic universities, but not all of them are attuned to the need to address these challenges. Not all of them are really actively striving to invite all of their students into a deeper life with our Lord. And I say unfortunately, and there are good people at every Catholic university I've ever seen, but I'll just highlight what I mean by this. So I went to a Catholic university, and I didn't know anything about Catholic universities other than my experience of Notre Dame, and I went to this university because of the classics program that they invited me into with some funding. And the first night in the dorm, the RA, my roommate told me, "We've got the best RA in the world. He's got a keg of beer and he's showing pornos." So pornographic movies and a keg of beer. And I said, "Well, we're all underage, isn't it?" And he said, "What's wrong with you?" Right. So I was a little different. I didn't join the party, and then I started trying to get involved with the campus ministry. And maybe this was just peculiar to that university, but the director of campus ministry was vocally pro-choice, and she promoted pro-choice materials in her office, Catholics for Free Choice organization. I had a friend who was going through RCIA who was, I told him he shouldn't be sleeping with his girlfriend. He asked the director of the RCIA program, I get this weird friend, and he thinks that I shouldn't be sleeping with my girlfriend. And she said, of course you should. You love each other, right? And, there are many other examples that were really, to me, scandalous. In fact, I wondered, well, maybe I'm not Catholic if this is what Catholicism is. I know I love Jesus, and I had a strong sense of the moral law. I've got great parents. But the university didn't live up to the expectation of parents and students. That's the real scandal, right? That there's this brand that was out there that was attracting people, and then you get there, and it's something very different. And unsurprisingly, the result was that most of the students who entered with me, they stopped practicing their faith, and hopefully they've come back. But I really was weird because I decided, that's not the path I'm going to take. Either I'm going to be evangelical Christian, or I'm going to be a Catholic, and I spent some time thinking about that, and thought, well, I'm going to be a Catholic. I did discern very briefly a vocation when I was in college, and there again, there's a certain contrast between what I aspired to and what I was told. So I was a budding academic type. I was also a student athlete, and the appeal when I sat down with the priests who I admired, to me was, well, it's a really comfortable life. You'll get to study what you want. You'll get to travel around. You've got friends. You don't have to deal with all of these distractions. And what would have been appealing to me at that time is, well, you have to sleep on a bed of nails. You'll just have bread and water the rest of your life. It's a life of sacrifice, and you get to bring Jesus to people. So it was providential in a way that didn't work on me, because God really did want my wife and I to get married, and she was at the same college with me. We met when we were 12 years old, and it was really going through our marriage prep, which we did while we were students at the university, that I began to encounter so many little pockets of evangelization. So Scott and Kimberly Hahn were just coming on the scene at that time. The new Catechism of the Catholic Church had just been published, and there was this magazine, Envoy magazine. We were working with Couple to Couple League, which put us together with some families that just really befriended us and built us up. So it was a wonderful opportunity to learn about my faith in ways that I never had, to love it, to love certain practices that I didn't grow up with, even though my parents were faithful Catholics. I didn't know about Eucharistic adoration. I didn't know what a novena was. Even though I'd gone to Catholic schools, you didn't pray novenas in the 1980s at this location. So it was great to discover all of that. But my wife and I, we were pretty alone in that walk in terms of our peers. Now things have changed even more. So there is a growth in these pockets, real communities where young people, Gen Zers and millennials, are flourishing in their faith. And that is a beautiful thing. And even more ministries. One of the ministries that we have on our campus, we invited Focus missionaries onto campus, for the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. They usually go to campuses that are not Catholic. Since the Newman Guide of Catholic Schools was first published, we've been recognized as a faithful Catholic university. We don't have a problem with our Catholic identity, but we do have a number of students who are not Catholic. Many of our graduate students are not Catholic, and about 25% of our undergraduates are not Catholic. They're attracted to the University of Dallas because we've got top-notch programs, core curriculum. Our med school placement rate, for instance, is up in the level where the Ivy League schools are. And they find themselves in this environment where Catholicism is really vivid. So why have Focus missionaries? Well, they concentrate on the people on the margins, the people who aren't going to daily Mass. And they do remarkable things on completely secular campuses, just remarkable things. Check them out. A lot of vocations are coming out of the Focus missionary work. The Augustine Institute. My oldest son works for Scott Hahn now as a fundraiser at the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology, which has just had a profound impact on the parish level. Amazing parish, and so many other sort of lay-run organizations that are exercising real leadership in the church. In addition to Serra. So I guess the point here is you have partners who are focused on cultivating a culture that really fosters vocations. And I would encourage you to get to know your partners wherever you come from, or even go to the national conferences for these different ministries. Faithful, vibrant, entrepreneurial, it's a beautiful thing. And at the University of Dallas, you'll get to hear from our executive director of the Institute for Homiletics, Dr. Carla Bellinger. We have this new institute that's focused on improving the preaching of our priests, deacons, bishops, and because they want to be most excellent, and they want some help. We need to find ways to connect with young people at the pulpit, as well as in other ways. Also at the University of Dallas, we have another institute that's dedicated to ministry and evangelization, the Newhoff Institute, which has got an enormous Hispanic outreach. And these are just local examples that have an impact nationwide, but you'll find in your own cities remarkable things happening. So connect with those organizations. And then I spent some time talking about all of these challenges, and one that's particularly present now, and it's one that was forecast by St. Pope John Paul II, is a loss of one's understanding of what it is to be a human, right? What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean ultimately, as John Paul II told us time and again, is it's a matter of being an image and likeness of God. That's still the case, right? So however confused, angry, disconnected young people are, they are images and likenesses of God. They have an eternal destiny. And there is so much reason for hope to be found in what you can foster and inflame, to enkindle and enlighten the underlying deepest part of their humanity. So what kind of, I've been talking about these opportunities, some reasons for hope. What I continue to do, and I imagine this is the case with many of you, is to go back to the pontificate of St. John Paul II. I continue to be inspired by his witness to hope, as George Weigel puts it. We must not despair when we regard the challenges, and I've only described some of them. We must not despair. And we have every reason, in fact, to know that the victory is ours. And what that victory is not conquering all of the evils in the world. It's finding ways to invite, particularly young men, to consider the priesthood. And when I think about other individuals, it's to invite people into friendship with our God, who has extended friendship to them. But it needs to be a reciprocal relationship. And we need to find ways to be joyful about the work that we do, as Pope Francis has reminded us on many occasions. There's a real joy of the gospel that we get to share, and we ought to rejoice in that, right? So what's happening at the University of Dallas, part of my invitation, or the invitation I received, was to reflect on some of what we do. Richard mentioned that he didn't realize the University of Dallas was a Catholic university until about last year. And we're Catholic in ways that are quite remarkable. We're not run by a religious community. We're not run by the diocese. We have a lay board. The bishop is on our board. He's the chancellor of the university. That's not a veto authority. So part of the original founding of the university, when the sisters of Our Lady of Namur and the Bishop Gorman put the university together in 1955, 56, is when we brought in our first class. It was to really be a great university, one that offers a truly excellent education. It was the design from the very beginning to have PhD programs, which we have, and we have DBA programs and master's programs. And as the university developed, it put together this core curriculum. So the intellectual emphasis at the University of Dallas is really robust. We do have fun on occasion, we do have sports, but you come to the University of Dallas to get a serious education, a rigorous education. And yet, we also do have religious communities that are woven into our very fabric. So in 1955, there was a monastery, former monastery in Hungary that had been seized about 10 years before. These Cistercian monks made their way from communist Hungary eventually to Irving, Texas, and there's this thriving monastery now. Those Cistercians have been a part of our faculty and other positions from the very beginning. We had the congregation I already mentioned. We had Franciscans who were part of us, but right now we've got a Dominican priory on our campus, the novitiate for the Southern Province of Dominicans. Our chaplain is a Dominican priest. We have Holy Trinity Seminary on our campus. That's a minor seminary. So we do all of the intellectual formation for the young men studying for the priesthood, both not just men from the Diocese of Dallas, but many other dioceses participate. We have a Neo-Catechumenal Way seminary in Dallas, Redemptoris Mater Seminary. We do all of the minor and major seminary formation for the men there. We have National Dominican Sisters who teach for us, and we're working on building a convent for them on our campus. Some members of their community also run a local school. And we have really active lay ministries around campus. There's a charismatic club of students on campus, Catholic charismatics, and a group within Irving that still exists, and we also have a traditional Latin Rite parish, Mater Dei parish, just up the road that a lot of our students participate in. So you have this great variety of ways in which the faith is expressed, and there are even more than I mentioned, all unified under an understanding of what it is to be really well educated. And really well educated, not for the sake of just being well educated, but really well educating so that you can serve God through sanctifying your work and transform our culture. We want our graduates to be the best surgeons, the best lawyers, the best businessmen and women. We've had 11 bishops graduate from the University of Dallas just in our short history, right? So we want to cultivate people who are really well formed intellectually, morally, and theologically, who have the capacity and the underlying education to really make a profound impact and to reclaim our culture. Do so with cultivating the virtue of magnanimity, right? Aspiring to do great and glorious things, which is always woven together with the virtue of humility, as St. Thomas Aquinas tells us. So how is this fostering vocations on our campus? Well, we have men in formation who study with us. We have women now in formation who study with us. But so many of our graduates, and we've had a great many priests and nuns come through the University of Dallas, they find their vocation at the University of Dallas. I was talking to our vocations director here in the diocese recently. We had him over for dinner last week, and he was a physics major at the University of Dallas from another part of the world. And I said, well, what made you choose to be a priest in this diocese? And he said, well, it was while I was studying at the University of Dallas, and I came here because of the physics program, and we have a top-notch physics program. But I found my vocation here, and I felt like I owed it to the University of Dallas and this diocese to exercise my ministry here, right? There are many other people who've had that happen. We have a campus outside of Rome, Italy, about 14 acres. All of our sophomores go to that campus, and that's another opportunity. You either come back discerning a vocation or soon to be engaged from your Rome excursion. There are all kinds of opportunities for romance of one sort or another that are woven into that period of time. So it really matters to have a culture in which young men can see the beauty of a vibrant Catholic culture, to have professors and peers who really are extending authentic friendship to them, to be able to participate in the active faith life. You can go to Mass at the Priory. You can go to Mass at the Abbey. We've got 2 daily Masses every day. We've got adoration every day. We have students walking around praying rosaries together. And last year on May 6th, we consecrated the University of Dallas to Our Lady of Guadalupe. We have a shrine on our campus. So these and so many other opportunities are there, inviting students in, but also giving them a vision of what they might be able to replicate through their ministry in ways that will be very different from this experience. And we want them to be tough. We want them not to just be in a bubble and then you go someplace else, the bubble is no longer protecting you, and what do? So you've got to throw tough arguments at these students. They need to learn how to navigate opposing argumentation, to learn how to really argue without quarreling, which is a lost art in much of our culture today, as you know all too well. So that kind of culture matters, and it matters for the formation of young people. It matters for the cultivation of those who are considering the priesthood. And I want to invite you just to think about ways in which you can wherever you are, wherever you find these other organizations, institutes, universities that get it, that see elements of this mission, to find ways to invest yourself. And I'm not talking about financial investments, but invest yourself, participate, get to know the young people there, and then reflect upon ways in which you can take that beyond, stretch it beyond those institutional anchors. Parting thoughts, because are you getting nervous, Richard? I've got one minute. It really is important to know the challenges and to recognize. I have to remind myself all the time of this with the young people who are living in my home, our children, but also others, that they're living in a different world. Even though my wife and I are very careful, we want them to be missionaries, and whatever their calling is, the first calling of all of us is to be missionaries, to be evangelists, and that means we don't just let them put their head in the ground and hide from all these challenges, right? So they're supported, but it's a very different world, and they're confronted with strange things that we didn't have to deal with. So know that this generation, know the challenges, but don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. There are always reasons for hope, and even the most disaffected, wrong-thinking, disrespectful young person is an image of God with a heart made for love, and I have seen remarkable conversions, just remarkable conversions. So don't lose heart. Just remind you, really this is about friendship, right? In all kinds of ways, we can invest ourselves in the lives of others. Not just to encourage them for vocations, but to call them into a deeper unity with Jesus Christ, who is their friend. And then when you do invite young people to consider the priesthood, call them to greatness. Call them to sacrifice. They know it's going to be hard. And just like the old army motto, right? We're looking for a few good men. There's, or was that Marines? I apologize. Yes. Young people want to sacrifice. They want to do great things. Appeal to that in them, and remind them that the church needs them, we need them, and God needs them. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Okay, thank you.